This subject comes up way too often, and really I don't like this statement. Two things can happen here. If they pull a knife, run. Okay. If they pull a knife, you shoot them. Both of those statements are a cop-out to me, because really this implies that all situations are the same. And this invariably is a huge problem in the martial arts community, traditional martial arts. It's a huge problem in mixed martial arts community. It's a huge problem in scenario-based or reality-based martial arts community, because there's a tendency to always lean towards a certain idea, like only gross motor skills work in combat conditions. Well, tell that to fighter pilots, tell that to snipers, tell that to top tier operators, okay? It's not necessarily have to be the case. You have to train yourself. The idea that in a situation where someone pulls a knife on you and you should run and that's your training, well, okay, what do you do when someone attacks you and you don't see the knife, versus they say they want to fight and they're gonna punch you, you're gonna go ahead and fight them, but when they pull a knife, you're gonna decide to run? Well, how do you know they have a knife or don't have a knife? Okay, this is kind of a problem now. You're really painting yourself into a corner with your philosophy. So your philosophy is they pull a knife, run, they pull a knife, shoot them. Okay, they pull a knife, you are armed with a firearm. You need to get to the firearm, pull it out, point it in the direction, and fire. And you need to fire accurately, because you might be in a room with 10 people that you care about, and it might be someone who came to your house with a friend that you don't know that has gone ballistic and pulled a knife. You don't know what the scenario is yet you have a universal solution to a particular problem. That's really no good. Now, when you go to the scenario-based or reality-based training people, oftentimes that you have the same kind of, well, in these scenarios we've tried, these techniques don't work, because it's even when it's not real, it's just simulated reality. You get nervous and you get tense and you fail at the technique. Absolutely correct. But you need to keep working on the technical aspect until it does work. Hence the saying, you have to die in combat, in training, a lot in order to survive in combat. You have to die often in combat, in training to survive in combat. And you don't get the opportunities. Okay, so people train scenarios, and then you have 5 times you did this particular technique that you saw on YouTube or some instructor taught you at a training seminar or camp, and 5 times you did that and 5 times it failed. Well, you need to do it 25 times at a slow speed until you can make it work and you have it perfect. Then you need to do it another 50 times in a combat scenario that is only 50% speed, until you can make it work. Then put it in a scenario that's reality based, and see how many times it fails before you actually can use it. And you will find inevitably that it becomes successful a percentage of the time, because nothing is 100%. A professional baseball player doesn't catch 100% of the balls that are hit in his direction. A professional pitcher doesn't strike out 100% at bat. And a professional batter does not hit 100% of the balls that are thrown to him that are hittable. Okay? Not talking about the ones that are not even hittable. Doesn't happen. Sometimes you hit a pop-up and you're out, right? Sometimes you hit a foul and someone in the stands catches it. So The same thing with martial arts. You have to be willing to fail at something enough until it works. This is where my instructor said to me many years ago when he was training in jiu-jitsu, and he started, I think in his late 50s, about my age. He said that he tapped so often training jiu-jitsu that he thought he was playing drums, and that's not a joke. Those are his words. So, you know, you're going to fail a lot before you're successful. So you take a knife-oriented training program and you say, well, that program's no good because if someone pulls a knife on you, there's no way you can go empty hands against a knife. Well, that's a foolish statement because it's actually happened repeatedly thousands and thousands of times in our history. The fact is that maybe you haven't practiced enough and you can't make it work when the person's coming at you and they're repeatedly attacking with intent and power, and you can't handle that because you just haven't practiced against that enough. I saw a gentleman place a video, it was really good, about fighting against a wall. The problem is, you know, in this mindset, you have to fight against the wall. Well, no, you don't. You can move. You can slide on a wall and you can rotate your body, which will make it more difficult for the attacker to pin you to the wall. And the same thing here, you know, in a firearm-based scenario, you know, oftentimes you're training and you're firing at a person with a knife, and you say, well, I can get 3 shots into him from 7 feet away, right? Okay, now you're in a situation where you have 50 people in the area of this individual, and you're going to start firing at him. I don't know that you're not going to end up hitting many other people. And in studies and tests, the rounds will pass through a human body, particularly if they don't hit bone, and even then they might still pass through the body and hit somebody you're not intending to shoot. So you can't say, you know, someone pulls a knife, shoot them. Someone pulls a knife, run. These are really statements that irk me as a martial artist and as an individual who wants to train people who have this mindset that, well, I carry a firearm everywhere I go. It doesn't mean that you can utilize that weapon 100% of the time. In fact, a large percent of the time, you might have to go hands before you can access your weapon. Particularly if you're in a law enforcement or you're in a security or a personal protection officer, you might have to go hands first before you can access your weapon, unless it's a certain type of scenario. So now let's just say you're a law enforcement. You see a guy, he's got a knife, he attacks somebody, he runs. Are you going to start shooting at him while he's running? Or are you going to chase him? If you chase him, are you going to catch up to him? If you catch up to him, are you going to shoot him? Or maybe he rounded a corner, and as you round the corner, there he is, and he pounces on you. You might have to use your hands, even though your mouth says you want to use your firearm, because you just might not be in the right situation for that to have happened. So you really can't just make this blanket statement. And part of the reason I'm making this video is I don't want to type all this information to those individuals who say, you know, that I'm wrong and that a firearm is way more the direction you should go. You should always be armed, and you should always use that as your first line of defense. Well, in fact, that's really a bad strategy, you know. So your thinking is flawed. So you need to maybe go back and think about what the possible scenarios are where you're engaged with a combative person who has a knife, even when you're armed with a firearm, Where are you at? Who is with you? How many friends does he have or not have? And who's behind them when you're shooting at them? And that goes back to basic firearms training. When you get your concealed carry, is what's your backstop? I believe that, right? Isn't that the case? And now we have these constitutional carry where you don't have to have training to carry the firearm, and you're John Wayne, right? Because you're walking around, you got a 45, and you don't need any assistance or any training, and you went to the range, 5 times in the last 10 years. Yeah, I don't know that maybe you're a good instinctive shooter, but I don't know I want to be around you, bro. I really think you're dangerous. I think you're more dangerous to the person that you feel is a threat to you than you might be to the people around you, right? Your friends are maybe in more danger because of you. So you got to rethink your mindset. You got to really rethink. You're carrying a firearm for what purpose? You're carrying it for self-defense. You're carrying it to defend a third party. You're carrying it because your job requires you to carry a firearm. I never really thought about some of this stuff until I started to help my friend who owns my student and friend who owns a security company, and I became an armed person guarding people. So my job is to watch after 3,000 children that are at an event. And someone comes in, even if they're coming in and they're firing, I just can't draw and start firing in the direction of the person who's doing the shooting, because there might be 150 people behind him. I might have to close the distance. I might have to get an angle. Does everybody know to hit the ground so that person is the only one exposed? And can I get my weapon out of my holster under those conditions, because it is a level 4 retention holster? And have I practiced taking that out? I know I have practiced it a lot in the last few weeks. And I know I need much more practice at extraction, position, and aiming, right? Even though I've been to the range more times in the last 6 weeks than I have in the last 6 years. So you're gonna tell me all you need is a firearm. Go buy a gun, right? And you don't know how it functions. You don't know how to shoot. You don't know how to reload. You're dangerous.